Hey guys, welcome back to this series of BIM rules of engagement. We're looking at exceptional QS. Again, I think this series is more looking at about leadership and what does it really mean to be a professional QS. And I want to look at things such as the technical skills as well as talking about a little bit about data literacy, which are obviously important if we start looking towards the age of AI, big data, and automation. And today we have Rolf Montague with us from ArcDocs in Ireland. Welcome, Rolf, to the hard-hitting platform, the BIM Dojo, where we discuss the hard-hitting issues around this week and the weeks to come is about the exceptional QS. What does it mean to be an exceptional QS? So all the way from Ireland, I know your weather doesn't quite look like the background here I have from Cape Town, but it's good to have you back on the series. And
thank you, Vaughan. Great to be here. Look forward to the discussion.
Super. Rolf, just if anyone is looking to follow you, I'm just going to share on the screen. They can find you on LinkedIn. Rolf is obviously a director at ArcDocs in Ireland. So feel free to follow him through his LinkedIn channel. And that should be as much introduction as we need for this particular channel series. Great. Rolf, I thought it was a really good topic for us to look at, and you and I have discussed it on various different occasions, looking at leadership. And we're not just looking at the leadership within the QS industry. I think in general, there is a lack of leadership within our industry since this whole digital transformation has come on board. And we can put technical skills and data literacy aside, which I think, as I said, is also obviously very important for AI, big data, and as well as automation. But that doesn't mean we need to ignore the human side of work. And those skills in these areas where robots are going to be doing the work, we still need the soft skills. And that is becoming even more critical in our nature of work as it evolves with machine learning and looking at data intelligence. So I think there's an automated aspect that is still very important, which we're seeing within the technology. But I think we are missing the soft skills. And if I look at the experience that you've had and we've shared, that is something I think we need to bring to this platform and discuss a little bit more emphasis.
Yeah, I'd agree, definitely. I'd agree with your point as well on, I feel it's not even you said that there's a sort of diminishing leadership with digital advancements in digital technology, but I think I don't think those are completely related. I think there's been a diminishing sort of leadership in the industry in general over many years. Like I've been in this business for a long time, so if you go back many years, people took professionalism a little bit more seriously back in the day, if you like, and architects, engineers, quantity surveyors were respected professionals, equal to lawyers and accountants and doctors. It was considered a profession, and somehow in the construction industry, the level of professionalism seems to have diminished. I don't think that's a direct consequence of technical advancements, but technical advancement certainly does have something to do with it, because obviously the leaders in organizations tend to be the more senior, older people who tend to be, this is a generalization of course, but tend to be more technophobic, and not struggling to keep it up with the advancements in technology. But there is some relationship between digital advancement and diminishing professionalism or leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the topic today's discussion, I think let's look around, as I said, showing on the screen, is leadership's one thing. We've got the issue around creativity, and then this whole thing about analytical thinking, emotional intelligence. Now, I don't know, that's a sore point for most QSs. I can say that because I was an old QS. So no. Do do quantity surveyors have emotional intelligence? Then there's also the side of the interpersonal communication side and active learning with a growth mindset towards technology. I think that's a gap that's missing in this industry, not recently. And I think it's something that every country is experiencing within its cultural as well as its policies and changing of standards.
Yeah. Well, we could go back to the analogy of professionals, and like I always like to look at the analogy of, say, a doctor. You know, and there's two types of doctors, I suppose. You can have a doctor who studied 40 years ago, became a GP or general practitioner, and has got into a mode of work and maybe hasn't bothered because they were busy to keep up with advancements in diagnosis and treatment, and sort of attending medical conferences and reading medical journals and books, etc. So that's one. So they're just kind of going through the motions of being a general practitioner and trying to keep up with their workload. And then you get the other type of doctor, which has done the same thing, qualified, but made it their business to keep up with what's happening in terms of diagnosis and treatment and diseases, maybe even specializing in a particular area of medicine. Now the question would be, who would you like to be treating you if you had a health problem? Which of those two doctors? Like, they're both doctors. Yeah, they both got a qualification. But certainly I know who I would, if would like to be treating me. I'd like to go to the doctor who has the latest knowledge in diagnosis and the best advice in relation to treatment. Yeah, it might be that I can't afford the treatment, or maybe the treatment isn't exactly available in the place I'm in, and I might have to go somewhere else to get it. But at least I want the best advice, and given the options.
Yeah.
And I think the same things happened in the AEC sector. You have architects, engineers, quantity surveyors, project managers, etc., who've maybe qualified a number of years ago and worked themselves up the ranks within organizations. And amongst that group, and I am generalizing, I do appreciate that. Amongst that group, there will be those who have made it their business to keep up with how the industry is moving, how technology is moving, and then the others who are just simply sort of going through the motions of doing business and are in a pattern of doing business the way they maybe did 10, 20 years ago. And I think the same question applies, if particularly if you're a client or somebody that's procuring services within the AEC sector, is who would you like to be treating you?
Yeah, I think it's a very good analogy, because if you think about it, when you've got a pain in your body, even if you've got COVID-19 and you think you've got it, you go see the professional to find out what the diagnosis is. And you don't walk to the professional and inform them and say, well, I looked it up on Google and Google told me I had it, but I thought I'd come for you for a second opinion.
Yeah.
And I often see this within the construction industry, where we speak too much about we need to educate the client. We need to tell the client, and the client needs to tell us what they want. It's the same principle as you're saying. We don't go to a doctor, educate him, tell him what we want to hear, and then he tells us what we don't want to hear.
Exactly. Yeah. And we found, in the last 12 years now, we've been in the business of BIM consulting and working with project teams, working with clients, working with design teams, working with construction teams to help them deliver through this BIM methodology. And it's astounding to me the level of understanding and knowledge amongst the senior leadership within some of the organizations that we've had to work with in this space. How poor their knowledge is of current practice in relation to not only technologies but standards, procurement methods, project strategies. It's as if they're flogging a service that was maybe appropriate 20 years ago, but it's definitely not appropriate now. And so yeah, that's one thing I really feel strongly about is, and I believe that that sort of lack of understanding and knowledge at the leadership level is imposing a barrier to people within organizations. So you might have really enthusiastic, young, tech savvy sort of QSs or architects or engineers within organizations that would really like to leap ahead, and that they're finding out about these new things, and then the company leaders are basically saying, no, just do it the way I told you to do it. Like this, I know how this business works. I've been in the business longer than you. um, and that, yeah, that's a barrier even within an organization to advancing
Absolutely.
within this sector and being at the cutting edge. And so, like, often people talk about the top-down approach versus the bottom-up approach, and um, but it has to be a combination of both, because, like, to be honest, the leaders within this industry have an enormous influence on the people that they lead, obviously within their organizations, and well, you even wonder if they're leading them. Maybe they're managing them. There's a big difference between leadership and management. I mean, management is
100%.
basically telling people what to do, and if you don't do it, you're fired. Leadership inspires people to follow them. Okay, and
Yeah.
like, you'd wonder how many of the current leadership are inspiring the youth to follow into their careers, into these
Yeah.
careers within AEC. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at how this technical advancement has changed the industry globally, not just in traditional management ways and hierarchical channels, I think we all witnessed how people during this pandemic, and what lengths humans have gone to make things happen based on having technology or not. And this technology, although it's allowed us to leapfrog this opportunity, I think the possibilities are limited. Yet we've got this problem with leadership. And again, you said it, there's a difference between leadership and management. I came from an old school background where I was taught that by the peers that I worked for that said, stick with me, I'll teach you everything you need to know as a quantity surveyor. And that is ingrained in the way I work today. And I appreciate and respect what they taught me. But I reached a level in my profession and my experience that I realized that I had to make decisions on my own, and I was overtaking them. And I think that's where we are at the moment. We've almost done a leapfrog where we're seeing the younger rookies of today are leapfrogging the older generation into these new digital ways of working. And
Yeah.
the mistake I think most this industry makes is that they think the role of a quantity surveyor is to measure and maybe do mostly cost management on the project based on the levels of information. And that's not the case. There's a really important roles, and in fact, they're in this order: will, resources, and experience. And those are the things that we have to challenge today within leadership.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm not a quantity surveyor. I'm an architect. So, yeah, one of my frustrations when I was practicing as an architect with quantity surveyors and the quantity surveying profession is, yes, they would measure costs and give you, sort of the outcome, but more often than not, the result was too late. So, on a typical project, the quantity surveyors would effectively allow the design team to be developing the design, and progressing the design for 2-3 months before they would actually sort of go take everything away, sit in a dark room for 2-3 weeks, and then sort of come and reveal the cost information. Okay, at which point, if it was too high, that was incredibly frustrating for the design team, because you've now invested a lot of time and effort progressing the design without getting sort of constant cost feedback, and it meant a lot of changes. And of course, no one was going to pay for those changes, because in the client's eyes, this is all design development, and so it's like going back to the drawing board in a sense. which, it would have been much more useful if the quantity surveyors took an active part in the design process throughout, giving constant feedback. Now, of course, in the paper-based world of 2D drawings and separate schedules and specifications, I do appreciate that's quite difficult, because for a quantity surveyor to go and analyze a set of 2D drawings plus a massive specification document plus lots of different schedules is a time-consuming exercise, and particularly when those three types of data might describe different buildings. You'd have a set of drawings that describe one building, you'd have a specification document that describes probably a different building, because it may have come from a previous project with the title page changed, and you'd have a whole lot of schedules that somebody typed out in Excel, which may or may not accurately reflect what was in the drawings or in the specification. So, like, the role of the QS there, would, as I see it, would be useful in sort of analyzing that data as it progresses, rather than at the end, but on a more consistent basis, so that the quality of information that is being developed is much better and useful, both to the QS but also to the project team, and then giving that sort of constant feedback. And BIM, for me, allows, because now you're working with digital data and computers can analyze and extract and work with data incredibly quickly. It gives this opportunity for the QS to take an active role in participating in the design process on projects where the designers are using BIM, because they can quickly extract data, they can analyze it, they can give feedback on the quality of the data, very early on, as to how useful it is, and also what it is they actually require to do the measurement. Like, I worked for as an architect for many years. I never had a QS tell me like what they actually needed. They basically waited for me to give them a set of drawings and schedules and specifications, and then, actually, the funny thing is, I actually joke about this, Hunter. I've never even asked a QS how they do their job, because I'd give them the drawings and the schedules and the specifications. They'd come back 2 weeks later with a bill of quantities, and I have no idea how they did that. And the first time I actually asked a QS how he did his job was when we got into BIM, and we stepped away from design, and we were now trying to get all the participants on a project to work together, and sat down with the QS and said, okay, well, you are one of the participants on a project. Like, what is it that you actually do? How do you do your job? And what is it that you need to do your job properly? And have you communicated that to the rest of the team?
Well, as the slide is, and I have to bring that up while you're talking, because and I've showed it before in the recent series, is that what is a quantity survey and what do you actually do? Is that good old saying, someone who solves a problem you didn't know you had in a way that you don't even understand.
For everybody in this industry, like, who's taking on a professional role, whether it's an architect, an engineer, quantity surveyor, project manager, like, these 4 things in the middle of the slide, I think are incredibly important, that for yourself personally, in terms of your career, but also for your business, that you develop an understanding and knowledge of the current practice of the industry, not what you were doing 20 years ago. That you take responsibility, professional responsibility, for what you do, and the way you collaborate with other people to support the project and not hinder the project. I think that's important. That you have some sort of vision of how business could be better, how your service delivery could be better, how the outcomes on projects could be better through better ways of working, supported by digitization, and ultimately all of that adds up to bringing more value to the process. And that's what makes you a good QS versus a bad QS firm, is if you bring value to the projects, people will use you again, because it was useful working with you. You gave good cost feedback very often. You didn't allow the team to wander off for 3 months and design something that couldn't actually be built within the budget, etc. So these are really important things to think about and understand if you just want to advance your career, advance your business in digital.
Thanks, Rolf. Yeah, I think we in for our closing. I just want to add my little clip. Great. Rolf, thanks very much for your time. Much appreciate your efforts. And let's keep these conversations going. I think they can get, we just find that the time is not, we find people sort of hit that 15-minute mark and we've lost them.
Yeah.
But thanks very much and look forward to further discussions.
It's a pleasure, Vaughan, and
thanks. Then.
Appreciate the great work you're doing with exceptional BIM. So keep it up.
Pleasure. Thanks, Rob. I'm still here, huh? Let me just see.